Movement in video games has always been a fascination with gamers. Sometimes it's a simple necessity, other times it can be very integral. The more freedom is given, the more tricks players will start figuring out, developing a separate skill set. Half-Life's movement is crisp and responsive, quite similar to its basis, Quake. They give a lot of freedom, which led to very intuitive controls. Then, things like bunny hopping were discovered. Not intentionally designed, yet within it, another dimension of gameplay was discovered. And while it became a core part of speedrunning in Half-Life and competitive play in Quake, Counter-Strike has a whole different story to tell. While initially movement was exactly the same as the game it's a mod of, over the next couple of versions it would get severely limited because obviously it just doesn't fit the gameplay. But despite that, there was skill to be found and managed to evolve into its own legendary game mode called Kreedz. This is the general term. It was originally just for parkour, where players would jump and climb up, and eventually all other forms of movement fell under the same umbrella. Just to clarify, surf is still its own separate thing, but when you have a map encompassing all kinds of tech, let's just call it Kreedz for simplicity's sake. There's nothing quite like it. The sheer precision and skill involved in micromanaging movement from block to block down to split-second decisions is unique to Kreedz, and I don't know of any other movement in a game that relies on such small details. Before I explain all that, where did our story begin? Patrick Wright, or better known by his online alias Kreedz, was a Canadian CS mapping enthusiast who has been in the game since the beta. From his enjoyment of climbing high places, he wanted to make fun maps as personal projects for his clan, ICP. On June 1st, 2001, the first one was ever made, KZ Haunted House V1, based on his home from back then. This means, contrary to popular belief, our origin point is not CS 1.6 or 1.5, but CS 1.1. The latest version during the time of this map's release. Anyway, Haunted House is a mess, but exactly what you would expect from someone just getting started. There's climbing at least. Afterwards, more would be made, but few were ever publicized. Out of all of them, his most popular was KZ Giant Bean B15, and from what I could gather, this may have been the first map to feature a timer, which became standard. Maybe that is what contributed to its popularity. What's important is the CS community at large was starting to take notice of these fun climbing maps, and soon enough, around 2003, it would establish itself as its own game mode, dubbing it Kreedz, and the first website by our creator would launch, and later, the communities expanded to other websites, clans, climbing records, servers, competitions, tons more maps, and tons more climbing techniques would be developed. Kreedz contributed as much as he could, but eventually left to focus on life. Nonetheless, the player base continued to grow internationally, and maps would still use the KZ prefix in his honor. So how does it play? Obviously, climbing itself is easy, just press forward and jump with an occasional crouch, but the tech is where it gets interesting. I'm not gonna bore you with physics lessons, and neither am I an expert, so here's the gist of it to the best of my understanding. Units is the measurement of speed in goal source, and very important. Strafing is the simplest technique and a basis for everything. After jumping, moving the mouse and holding a specific direction key is how you make turns. B-hopping is when you jump, hold either a left or right direction, and as you are about to land, jump again at the exact moment of impact with the ground to propel forward. To be precise with the jumps, the scroll wheel is used as a bind, so just scroll plus A, scroll plus D repeatedly in synchronicity to maintain velocity. Walking sideways by holding forward plus a direction causes you to go beyond the speed limit. Combine this with a jump plus strafing in the air multiple times in sync, then ducking right before landing. Congratulations! You jumped a longer distance than normal, ergo a long jump. To understand how good it is or make it longer, these are the important stats. Final distance traveled, pre-strafe is the speed after jumping, amount of strafes performed mid-air, and efficiency of them. Explain the sync between mouse and keys plus how many units gained. Then lastly, the jump off shows how many units away from the edge you jumped. The closer, the better. So a 230 block jump, for example, can be done by doing a 235 long jump with a maximum 5 units jump off leeway. But the bigger the block becomes, the more strafes you'll need to gain distance with better efficiency, a higher pre-strafe, and smaller joff. Now, the math of why all this happens is extensive, but that is how it relatively works across all CS games. The other techniques follow the same or similar path. B-hop jumps, weird jumps, count jumps, high jumps, and their variations are too many to describe individually. Not to mention the smaller things like up B-hop, edge bugs, or slide, which is like surf but not the same. I could sit here all day. These specifics in timing and diversity in techniques are what makes KZ so complex and challenging. Hitting the correct numbers and synchronization to nail a jump is so satisfying. So combine performing them quickly and intuitively to beat a map as fast as possible, that requires a lot of precision and skill to pull off. On the topic of KZ maps themselves, objective is always the same. Start the timer and make it to the end as fast as possible. Originally, they all followed similar design patterns with repetitive jumps and occasional strafes, usually going up, so if you fall, well, time to start over. Others would be more forgiving by separating each challenge into blocks, so not all progress is erased when falling. Then come B-hop maps and other tech-specific ones. Visuals aren't the most important, but it does add to the experience if a map blends its challenge with the environment rather than being simple and linear, but looking pretty definitely helps stand out regardless. Over the years, they became increasingly more complex and other tech would be mixed into them, so being versatile is very important. Don't worry though, servers do allow the use of checkpoints to make it easier, or if you feel brave, be a pro and use none. Maps vary widely in difficulty and length with thousands to choose from. In fact, there are so many it rivals the amount of diffuse maps. Today, there are very active communities that maintain world records, servers, and even host competitions. KZ is one of the only CS game modes to be this dedicated and survive for so long. A true testament to the complexity and skill ceiling of movement in this game. But this is just CS 1.6. What about the others? In CS Source, movement is similar, the techniques also work the same way, but I gotta say, jumping and climbing just isn't as precise. Feels a bit floaty and smooth, landing from the air is less impactful. The community probably felt the same, as there are hardly any KZ servers I could find, but there is another side to this. This floaty movement served very well in Surf, and combined with the expanded capabilities of the engine, there were some crazy maps made, and this is where the game mode really solidified its popularity. B-hop is interesting because it was discovered that hitting the jumps consecutively increases the speed with no cap. We are so back to the Quake days, boys. No, but a cap was eventually placed, which can be turned off and evolved B-hop into a different beast by flying through maps where not only accuracy and synchronicity are important, but also a flow similar to Surf. Tricks was invented here too, a movement game mode that revolves around two players coordinating and doing things like flash boosting. Due to its nature, I would put it in a different category. It's still worth a mention though. Despite also being more popular in the past, CSS still has a B-hop community with many servers. It's not for me, I honestly prefer going from block to block, but knowing how movement feels, it's better suited this way. It's not all bad though, because someone did have an idea. What if we can have the same as before, but with better graphics? And that would become KZ mod, or Kreedz Climbing, a free Half-Life 2 mod with 1.6 movement from 2008. It's old, and used to have its own community website. I gotta say, they did a pretty good job. Feels a lot more firm when performing tech, it's a different engine, so 100% accuracy isn't possible. Besides eventually becoming a standalone game on Steam in 2017, there are other features to make it more worthwhile, like power jump, tag, raceway, art tools, and much more, plus a Steam workshop. You might notice though there isn't much of a player base today, and my vague assumption would be, as the fan base was decreasing over the years, people preferred to stick with CS instead of compensating for something that is close. A real shame, because this is an otherwise great mod. As for CSGO CS2, obviously KZ has its place and thrives in its own niche, but there are some caveats here to consider. See, due to its competitive focus, movement is a lot more restricted than in other games. Hitting B-hops is inconsistent or downright impossible, along with the stamina limit on crouching. KZ servers have to employ scripts to alleviate these restrictions. Also, binds are recommended to improve the experience, and all this combined may feel wonky to some people and deter them. On top of that, I remember seeing some servers run a script to allow increasing velocity when strafing before jumps because long jumps didn't work without it. Other than that, in terms of how alive it is, Surf and B-Hop are just as prevalent, plus regular old KZ has a more firm presence. Rest assured, with everything I've said, it's still a fine experience once you get used to it. Alright, here's the part where I discuss the condition of the current state and ponder the future in a melodramatic fashion. Well, this time, I don't have much to say besides KZ ain't going anywhere. Yeah, as mentioned, it's not as popular as it used to be, nor has it changed much. Likely because, as I've pointed out before, there are tons of other movement games to play today. Gaming is much larger. The reason it will persist is just with so many skills to acquire, the challenge never ends, and that's fun. It can even extend to other Valve games, so there will always be people to enjoy it. The player's fascination with movement in video games is eternal, it seems. Yeah. Well, I'm off to pour some cola on my oven. The acidity might really help with the rust that's been building up, or maybe the sugar will make it worse. Worth a try still.